You're listening to Finding Your Genius Zone with Dirk Nevelle. With the help of successful individuals across industries, Dirk breaks down the unknown parts of every vocation while highlighting the importance of finding a career where you can leverage your natural skills, passions, and interests. Now here's your host, Dirk Nevelle.
Hello, everyone. This is Dirk Nevelle. Welcome to my podcast. On with me today is an old friend, Craig Randall. Welcome, Craig.
Thanks, Dirk. Great to see you and great to be on.
Yeah, it's funny. I haven't seen Craig in a long, long time. And I've been kind of following you, Craig, social media, and I've been intrigued by what you do. And I thought it would be a really interesting podcast personally, because it's something that's fresh for me. Craig is an older brother of a friend of mine from high school. And like I said, a lot of good memories. Craig, people are coming on here, and I don't know what we're going to put on a title for your image, but when I talking to you just before I hit record, to me, you were a principal in the school world, and you're kind of a trainer. And my best attempt to articulate it is you kind of help principals and teachers create a better observation of and in an environment where there's a lot more trust built, and ultimately I think the school would function better. Now, that's probably not the greatest description, but how would you explain to the audience what it is you do?
Yeah, I was a school principal, and really from the very start, the way we do teacher observations right now, I never liked it. And I was really lucky when I got my principal certification and met a guy that did it differently. And what I started with him, it evolved and evolved and evolved. And it was really about building relationships with teachers and involving them in the process instead of having them feel picked on, which is kind of what teacher observation feels like now. And teachers loved it from the very beginning, and they felt supported, and they were way more willing to take risks trying new things. And so just along the way, it evolved until eventually it turned into a book. And now I go out and I train school leaders how to do what we call trust-based observations. And that's it.
So what was the result of the old way, where people felt threatened or they felt like not safe? Like, was it ultimately, was there more turnover, people leaving schools? Was it like, what would you say the negative aspects of that old system was?
I mean, interestingly, like there have been two big research studies come out in the last 5 years, one by the Gates Foundation and one by the Annenberg Institute for Educational Reform. And they both say the same thing. It doesn't improve teaching and learning. So bottom line is it doesn't do that. But I've definitely talked to people regularly who will say they had a friend or they know somebody or they had a bad experience with a boss with this kind of a model, and they left the profession. I personally believe that if we were doing trust-based observations, we'd have a teaching surplus, not a shortage, because people feel supported this way and they don't the other way.
Did you say that you were a teacher once and then you were observed, and so you can relate to what it was like on that side of the fence?
Yeah, I was. I mean, even though when it was, I'm not sure I had any horrific evaluation experiences, but even when it was a good one, they were like isolated incidences. You'd be observed and they'd give you suggestions. And then if you're lucky, once more during the year, but nothing from the first one came up again. So nothing built on each other. And that was the best case scenario. Some scenarios, I had 2 years where I wasn't observed at all. Like, how am I supposed to get better without somebody, engaging with me in a conversation? And so we just developed a different model where we see you frequently and it builds on each other, and we focus on strengths, and we ask you about your practice instead of just telling you, when it makes a world of difference.
How challenging is it? Like, I would think the system has been in place for a long time. And sometimes when you, like with technology, if you disrupt something, it takes a while to kind of penetrate that. Like, how open are these principals that have been doing it their way for so long to learning and kind of like shaking their foundation a little bit? Is it hard to get people on board, or are they like, hey, something's not working, I'm open?
It depends on the principal. I mean, there's a lot of things at stake. And it really started with No Child Left Behind, this really intense style of rating teachers on their teaching moves, and which is now 22, 23 years ago. So we do have a generation of that's all people know. But a lot of legislation followed up on that. So in public schools, depending on the state, it's hard to break in because people don't know this research yet. So on one level, we're trying to get people aware of that to change research. And then on the individual level, like the people that are reaching out now, because this is still fairly new, they're reading the book or seeing a social media post or hearing a podcast, and they're just going, yes, because it resonates with them right away. And so the people that we're training now, they're easy because they're on board. Like Malcolm Gladwell in Tipping Point talks about like there's 5 stages, and the first one is innovators. And the second one is early adopters. And that's where we're at now. The people that are like, oh, yes. Oh, you did that. I read that. Okay, great. Then the next 3 stages are early adopters, late adopters, and then laggards. So we think we'll hit a point in the next 2, 3, 4 years where it'll be kind of a rush of people going, I've been hearing about that. Now I'm ready. And then the last stage, laggards, I don't ever want them to do it, to be honest.
Yeah. Well, they eventually may kind of die away, right? I mean, you got to adapt,
Hopefully,
right?
not always. Sometimes they stay in and ruin people's lives for a long time.
So what is it about it? Like, you're passionate about the content, you've written a book on it, but do you really enjoy when you're giving a talk to the principal, do you actually work with them and the teachers simultaneously, or are you just training principals?
No, it's a week-long training at a school, and it's super, like people say, it's invigorating and exhausting. It's full on for a week. And so we're upping your knowledge over the course of the week, but it's practice by doing, and we build mastery. And so we go into classes and we have an observation template, and we all fill that out, and we come back and we go over it together. And then we kind of have a script for how they unpack. They can personalize it, but the reflective conversation where they go over it, and then we talk about that. And so we're really training the principals how to do trust-based observations, but with teachers in their building. And the really cool thing is teachers love it so much that the momentum really starts building just over the course of the week. And teachers get excited about something being observed that they dreaded beforehand. So kind of we're training the leaders, but the teachers are experiencing it at the same time.
Yeah, it's really, I just think about the down of like the effect of that, and then how the teachers show up with their students, and then how the students show up with their families, and then eventually how the students show up in their careers. I mean, it just seems like there's so many people that can get affected, top down. It's like pretty powerful, I would imagine.
I mean, if you think about it, like as a school leader, when I'm trying something new like this, and they're struggling with it at first because there's a lot of unpacking that they have to do. And so they're being vulnerable in front of their teachers. So what are they doing? They're modeling vulnerability and they're modeling risk taking, which is exactly what we want our teachers to do with our students. So our students will be vulnerable and take risks too. So it really, really, and with the way we do it now, teachers don't want to take risks because the way we observe now, when we grade teachers on their teaching moves, it makes them cautious. And so does that affect their teaching with their kids on some level? I'd like to think not, but maybe sometimes it does. And this way we think we're modeling all the way from top down what we want to see with our kids. And that's the ultimate goal, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it really when I was talking to you before, I was like, I know there's something here that fits with my podcast, but what I'm really trying to do is get kids, young adults, people changing careers to be courageous and brave. Yeah. And feel confident, failure's okay, and you got to take a chance. My personal feeling is so many people just get stuck and they pursue a career. Maybe it's their dad's voice or social media, but I love what you're doing. So what would you say? I mean, I know there's probably a million answers, but the consistent aha for a teacher, is it them feeling confident to lean into their uniqueness and their zone of genius to do it their way? What would you say, like after a week-long seminar, like what would be a consistent, Craig, this was amazing. I can't believe I feel this way. What is that feeling that kind of pops up a lot?
Well, I think that's a multifaceted question. I think there's so many layers. I think one is, first off, if you get into teaching because you want to make a difference in the lives of young people, right? And I'm not getting into teaching so I can get rich. So already you've got passion behind it. Some people lose that along the way, and maybe our job is to help them find it. But when I'm doing that, and look, behaviors have escalated, misbehaviors, I should say, have escalated since COVID. And it's challenging, and kids are bringing their baggage from whatever they're at. So I can have my plans, and plans can go awry because of whatever happens in the class. And we have to respond in the moment to that. And so when I'm doing a job that's that difficult, First off, when you can recognize what they're doing and point out their strengths, which is really what we focus intently on, that's not the sole purpose of it. One, it feels great to be recognized. Like, I'm doing hard work, and now you're saying it approaches satisfactory or versus satisfactory. None of that has to do with improving teaching and learning. And we're seeing you do this. We're seeing you do this with relationships. We're seeing you do this with classroom management. We're seeing you do this to make it engaging for students. Man, we'll get tears of joy literally just having that shared with them. And then to value them as professionals, like, we start not by telling them, by asking them what they were doing to help students learn, what they might do differently. And so by valuing them as professionals, I think those are big pieces. But then beyond that, there's a million different ways you can be. There's certain elements of teaching that we want to have that factor into good teaching, but we all want to be ourselves. Like, Dirk can't be Craig as a teacher and be his best teacher. Dirk needs to be Dirk as a teacher to be his best teacher. And we have to acknowledge and appreciate what you bring that's unique to you. And so I think those are different elements that factor into your genius zone. It's almost a combination of good practice and being my best, most passionate self that's me and true to me at the same time.
Yeah. What about, like, is there ever moments of, I don't want to say criticism or constructive feedback? Like, is it all positive, like kumbaya stuff? Or is it, I don't mean kumbaya, but is it all
No,
like,
I hear what you're saying.
Or do you ever have to kind of, I don't know, trigger?
You want to. No, I mean, generally we want to build trust, and trust takes time. Brene Brown talks about, like, trust and the way that you lower somebody's vulnerability so they feel safer taking risks is to build trust. And it's a series of little actions. And we think all these little things we do in the reflective conversation afterwards build that. And she talks about, like, a jar and filling in a marble at a time into a jar. And so generally we'll wait until the fourth visit. There's exceptions, like if you're a new teacher in your classroom management sport. But there's two things that factor in. One, our observation form, we don't fill in everything because we don't see everything. And we say, if we don't see anything, if it's blank, it's not a negative. But teachers will look at it and they'll start thinking on their own about what they want to get better at. At the same time, at a certain point along the way in the visit, a number of visits, like as early as the fourth visit, we generally say, we'll ask permission, but even to offer a suggestion, and listen to that, we ask permission to offer a suggestion. Because when you tell somebody that you want them to get better at it, no one likes to be told. But when you ask them, generally they'll say yes, and then they'll come along more for the ride. And so, yeah, we definitely help teachers get better. And we have 9 areas of teaching that we look at. And so we are always thinking which one of those 9 areas would best help them. But even then, we provide a lot of support, the same kind of support we would want a teacher to provide to a student. We provide to those teachers to help them grow. And we only work on one area at a time into that one area is where we wanted to. Because if we overload you, then you end up not really getting better at anything.
Yeah. I was thinking about, you had this background, I think 10 years roughly, you lived all over the world. Is that right?
Worked at international schools. Yep.
So what was the catalyst for this? I think you kind of referenced it before I hit record, but, like, what was the moment where things shifted for you? I don't think this was your final, like, this wasn't the plan, right? This kind of happened along the way. How did that happen?
I mean, I think, Dirk, I've always kind of followed my passion in terms of career. Like, I saw somebody be a school counselor and I thought that'd be great. And then I coached on the side, and an opportunity to come up into college coaching manifested. And so I felt passionate about that. And then ultimately I didn't feel like I was making a big enough of a difference with the coaching, like on the human being level. And my wife and I, on our very first date, had talked about international school teaching, and we went over. And then when we were in Poland, one of the principals said, "Craig, I think you'd be a good principal." And really, that's when I found my calling, is when I met my mentor, who used to run the program at Western Washington University. And then it just evolved and evolved and evolved.
So was this school of thought, this curriculum, this training content, are there a lot of Craigs out there doing this, or are there a few? I mean, is this a new thing?
It is. I think it's just, that sounds so arrogant to say, but I'll just say this. All the other models that are out there are all variants of the same thing. I look at you and I give you a 1 to 4 rating from you're horrible to you're amazing on, like, this big list of different teaching strategies. And research shows as soon as we start grading your teaching moves, teachers want to play it safe. And so we're the only one out there that has transformed it. And we do what the research says. We don't grade teaching. we still evaluate you, but we do it on professionalism, how you get along with others, things like that. And when you do it this other way, people feel safe and now they'll take risks. And so we're the only ones out there doing that right now because I don't think anybody else thought of a different way, but it's so logical. It's
Yeah.
like treat people well and as professionals, and guess what? They do better. Judge them and belittle them and they don't do well. It's like, duh.
Yeah, I get it. So how do you scale yourself? Like you can only be in one place at one time. Like, are you trying to take this online, or is it really a live in-person kind of?
It's in person because there's so much power in the school with the teachers feeling it during the week. Really, what we do is we're just starting to now this year and now next year growing where I can't do it all myself. There's only so many weeks you can be on the road. The great thing is every single week I'm training people and I'm looking at the people that I'm training and think who's at a point in their career where they could go on the road and do this and who would be really, really good at it. And so we're tapping into the people that we're working with every week. So I automatically have a pool of people that already know and believe in it. So it's actually really easily scalable because I'm constantly working with new people that eventually people are asking, hey, Craig, if you ever grow, and the right people, that's what we're doing.
So if you're watching, I mean, maybe the content that you're talking maybe isn't interesting, but you're interested in being a trainer for whatever thing. Like, tell us about the lifestyle of being a dad, a husband, and being a trainer where you're on the road a lot, traveling. Like, what caught you by surprise? Like, you think you know what it's like. It's fun. You get to meet new people. You get to travel around. There's probably some hard things too.
So I'll say I got really lucky. So my kids graduated in 2020, COVID year, and the book came out in late 2020. And so I had an empty nest. And so traveling, well, except that first year, I didn't really get to do much work because of COVID. But so I didn't have to deal with that. Like I'm gone half the year at least. And so like if I had kids at home, I'd have to decide. It's like, even when I'm looking at people like that would be potential trainers, I'm like, oh, they've got little kids. They're not going to be there for a while because of that, or they don't want to do it a little bit. And so you have to weigh that out, I think is really important because you have to have that. So I got lucky on that, but I think that's an important consideration. I think, I don't know. I don't mind travel. And I mean, if you get enough traveling, you get bumped up to first class all the time and that makes it better. I think, like you just have to balance your life still. Like, you're eating out all your meals. Like, how do I do that and not put on the very first 4 weeks I trained, I put on 8 pounds. And I was like, whoa, I need to stop having cocktails every night with dinner. And like, I stayed at Airbnbs. I was like, no, I need hotels with gyms in them. And those are little things. And so I treat myself to nice dinners. Like that's it. And it's funny that training is so intense that people say, are you lonely on the road? And it's like, you meet new people every week and it's really intense. And by the end of the day, you just want to relax. If you were super extroverted, maybe you wouldn't like that at night on the road, being by yourself. I don't know, but I think you have to be really, really passionate about this is my mission in life. Like I know till the day I won't retire, I'll get back at some point, but because it's my mission in my life, like at the end of the week, we ask people like, tell us about the week. Let's do a closure. And people will say things like, this is the best thing we've ever had. And so like to get that every Friday is pretty damn fulfilling. But if I was just doing it, like just as a job, that'd be tough.
Your kids are out. I know you got one that's going back east, one international, family life, your wife, like how hard is it? Like, I'm a big family guy. I coached all my kids' sports. I like to go to bed with them, wake up with them.
Yeah.
That's got to be difficult too. Like, how do you balance that with your wife?
It's a transition for sure. I think we're still working it out. We're still trying to figure out what's the right amount of weeks a year to be gone and build it versus too many. And I think we've come across that. And I think we make it a point to talk every day on the road, and we make sure that we FaceTime instead of just talking, even if it's just like 5 minutes. And so I think that's an important thing. I think the bigger challenge is for her. because she's got a life. Like when I'm on the road, my life is predetermined exactly what it is every single week for her. And so it's like her figuring out, how do I have a life that's kind of sporadic, weeks here and weeks when he's not here? And how do I have a routine that's consistent when it's almost impossible to have a routine that's consistent? You almost have to have two separate lives, and she's still working on that, and it's hard. So I think those are things that you just have to talk about, right? Like everything, communication.
I mean, these are the things that I kind of, the why behind my podcast is, okay, let's just say you're all in on getting into training, but like I want people to understand, like, okay, you're going to be on the road. If you're going to have a family, based on when you're doing this and the age of your kids, there's going to be time away. And I think these are the things that a lot of young adults don't think about when they think about a career. They don't really understand the lifestyle. Compensation, I'm not asking you what you make, Craig, but like when you're doing these week-long training seminars, like, do you charge based on, is it black and white? Does it scale based off of different functionality or different? I mean, how do you charge for something like this?
We have a going rate, and yet we work with people. I mean, we run into schools. Like we did a diocese of 8 Catholic schools in northern Minnesota, and their tuition is really, really low. And so we scaled our price to make it work for them. In the UK, the money that schools are allotted for professional development is significantly lower than in the US. And so we scale for that. And so, like, when you have a mission, like, you don't want money to get in the way. Like, there's a bottom line, and they were like, I won't work below this amount per week because that's just, but other than that, it's like, I'm going to help you because it's what we do. And so we just find ways to support people to make it worth, because it's valuable. It makes life better for students and teachers and principals. So.
Yeah. I love it. So the audience, a lot of my audience are going to be people in school, coming out of school, grad school. What is it? I'm just curious, the 10 years or so and the time you spent overseas, like, what's the difference? Like, you know, we get so locked and loaded, our lens of the world, you know, whatever it's politics, what you name it, is our lens. But you've learned so much just by being exposed to different cultures, different ways of doing it. Well, is there like one or two things that jump out, like that might surprise our US audience on what you've learned as it relates to education, maybe even careers, and like how kids in Finland are choosing careers, or Germany or South America? I don't know, but have you learned something like that surprised you?
People are people. I think is maybe, I'll share a quick story. I worked in Saudi Arabia, and so there's a mom in Saudi, and she's got even the face covering, so you can only see like her eyes. Everything else is covered up, and we have like Week Without Walls trips in international schools. They're pretty elite schools. So you go to places like Habitat for Humanity trip in Cambodia or something like that. And so we had a big parents meeting about this, and you can imagine what my parents thought when I told them I got my very first principal job, but it's in Saudi Arabia. Like, they're freaking out, and we're in a walled compound, and there's guards with, you know, machine guns outside the gate. It feels really safe, and you get used to it really quickly, but they're just doing that to protect us, really, just in case of an extremist, which is not likely at all. Don't want to freak anybody out. But we're having this meeting. And so this mom who's Saudi, and I think what my parents thought, and she raises her hand and she says, will my baby be safe in Cambodia? And it's like, right, mom's a mom's a mom. Like, Cambodia is like one of the safest places I've ever been in my life. But we're all the same. We're all human beings. And the other thing that I'll say, I mean, your day-to-day life is the same. It's just a little bit harder with language barriers. And then maybe I'll say the biggest gift has been for my kids, because global citizenry is a big thing in international schools. So we came home for 11th and 12th grade, which I'm really glad the kids got to experience some US schools as well, because they had cultural and racial diversity, but not socioeconomic diversity, because they're all upper end schools. We came home, and on their 17th birthday, I have twins. They wanted to go up to Seattle to play around. And then that night they wanted to go to a lecture at the University of Washington on the Arab-Israeli conflict. That's the gift, is like, that's how my kids think because they went to school with displaced Palestinians, wealthy ones, but displaced Palestinians, right? And so
Yeah.
those would be a couple little stories.
Yeah. I mean, exposure. Do you have, I know this might be a trap question, but do you have a favorite country? I mean, is there one that if you could keep going back to, you would?
I mean, I love going to all of them. I like I wouldn't live in Saudi again, but this is what I'll say. Of the 5 places I've been, Poland and Brazil were the best. And we always say any country for Poland, we say any country that has beer gardens on bike paths is a good place to live in. And then in Brazil, I mean, people were so warm wherever we went, but the Brazilians are the nicest, warmest people I've just ever come across in my life, and the weather's pretty good too. So
super cool. I know you're in Tacoma. Do you see yourself sticking there, or do you see yourself maybe making another move one of these days?
I'm tired of cold, wet, rainy winters and falls and springs. You know, we all know it's the best place in the country from July through September, but I can do my work anywhere. So
yeah.
We'll see what happens.
So I was thinking, okay, so I mentioned I knew Craig. So Craig, I mean, I just when you're younger, there's older brothers that are super cool, and you were always one of those really nice. I mean, I just looked up to you. I thought you were really nice, and you were always like, you weren't like some of the brothers who would pick on. And I always really had great memories of you, and so I feel like you're a very likable, compassionate guy. And then I'm trying to think, okay, what are like the things that make you so good at what you do? Like, obviously you can relate well to people like you, but if you're getting into training and you're starting your own company and you're trying to do what you do, like what are 2 or 3 of the traits that have served you well? Because not everybody could do what you do. But why is it that you do it so well?
Well, first I want to say, whoever is out there, you have to be you. Right? Whatever, you have to do your best, nicest you, but you have to be yourself and not try to be somebody else. I think I have really strong emotional intelligence. I think I read people really well. I think I read situations really well. I remember my first really serious girlfriend would talk about how nice I was, and I just cringed at being called nice. But I think I am nice, and I think, not just in teaching, any profession, being nice matters. Like caring about people matters. And I just think, I'm not sure it's a trait, but I just, like, I've always had things that I've been passionate about, and I've always pursued those passions wherever it took me. And I haven't regretted that ever.
I mean, that's an interesting point. Is you and I both grew up in Bellevue, and Bellevue is different today than it was back
It's a
when
lot for me, but yeah.
Yeah, Bellevue High School. You went to school in Bellevue. I mean, we were around.
Yeah.
We were around a lot of people with money, right? We were exposed, and you chose a career that you said you weren't really. It wasn't about the money. It was about making a difference. I think that's brave, and I think that's maybe not so common when you are exposed to a different type of world and society. Like, what was it? Like, I don't know if the question is, what was it that allowed you to break through, that and kind of pursue your passions and not be tempted to kind of run that race that nobody really wins? Like, you didn't do that. Why?
Well, I mean, I went to school thinking I was going to be a CPA like my dad was. And I didn't really like that stuff. And when I changed to become an English major, and I think just taking different courses and, the undergraduate and exploring and meeting different people from different areas in college, like you do, just maybe, I grew up in a fairly conservative Republican household that you would consider like from that, that East Side area, to throw out a broad stereotype that I know is not completely accurate. And all of a sudden you're exposed to people that grow up in different families with different values. And then, so I just started following what I wanted to do. My dad said he wouldn't pay anymore because I wouldn't get a job that was, we managed to make that work. And then but I still didn't know what I wanted to do when I graduated. And then I had an uncle that was an elementary counselor, and I went to work with him one day, and I was like, yes, that's cool. Like making a difference with kids. And it just resonated with my heart. So
yeah.
don't feel like I'm really answering that question that well, but
No, I think you are. I think the question, the 1B or 1A, 1B of that is I don't think a lot of people do that. I think a lot of people kind of, they're not brave enough or courageous enough to kind of do what you did. Like you were a beta at UW, right? I mean, and then you came out and you went into something that you said passionate about. And I guess the question I have is, do you have any advice to somebody that might have that's conflicted and they have these voices in their head about what they think they should do, but maybe they really want to do a 180?
yeah, listen to your voice. I mean, just this is what I think is, I mean, one, we're not here that long. And the 40 hours a week, if I'm lucky to only work 40 hours, that's a lot of my waking life. Do I want to spend it with something that's just to make money or that I'm not experiencing joy from? Not that there's not hard times, in any job along the way, but that I don't feel passionate about just so I can bring home a check. I mean, or more money or have a nicer house or whatever. It's just like that's not going to long term sustain you in a way that's fulfilling. And I'm mixed about the word happiness because happiness feels like a feeling that comes and goes, but something that's fulfilling and that you have passion about, man, that drives you. And so if I'm thinking like, well, I might disappoint my parents will cut me off, my whatever, like I'm living my life for me and for what it's just too dang short to do anything other than like what drives us to me.
Yeah, I get it. I imagine you show up very different to your kids, for example, and your wife. Like when you are happy, and you said you don't like that word, but let's just say you have full of energy and you're motivated and you have joy, right? And you're like, I would imagine that just you're talking about like teaching principals to teach teachers to teach students, like all these people, like what you're doing though, by just being in a profession that brings you energy, like it's the same downhill effect. Like all the, I didn't have a dad like that. I had a dad who was miserable and it was always, always, and I'm not playing the victim. It's just is what it is. But like, if I could have seen a dad that was happy and full of, I think it could have really changed me in a lot of ways. So I think it's very cool that you're able to do that. If let's just say the training was off the table, for whatever reason, I always ask this question. I usually ask it later in the process, but is there a dream job that you would love to have? Like, and you might say I'm doing it, but let's just say you can't answer that way. Is there another career that you would love to be doing?
Oh, wow. That's a really good question, Dirk. It probably sounds, I mean, one, I never planned any of this, right? I never knew, even as it was what now is trust-based observation was evolving, I didn't like for the first 7 years really know that I was doing what it would become. And so honest to goodness, I mean, I don't know where life will take me, but I don't really. I just like these weeks when I'm in school are so intense and they're so fulfilling. And it's just like, I can't really think of anything that would be more fulfilling. I mean, being the kid that wanted to be the pro athlete, sure, but those days are long gone, let alone my lousy genetics that would never allow for that. So, no, man, I feel really, really, I feel so lucky that I have a mission for my life. So till the day I die, maybe something will happen. I know what I'm doing. And I'm here to transform the world of teacher observations.
Love it. I think I've done like 3 podcasts with teachers, and I'm a big fan of teachers that, the exceptional teachers that make a difference. That is there any advice you'd give to somebody that's interested in some of the discussions I've had are like, can't make enough. There's just all kinds of things that like what's any advice that you might be able to give to somebody that's listening right now that's like, maybe they don't want to do what you're doing, training, but they're really interested in being, a high school or a college teacher or an elementary teacher or even a counselor.
Or a social worker or something that's not a money job. Is that kind of what you're saying?
Yeah.
Look, you adapt to whatever there's a certain amount of money that we need to make. And I mean, look, I'm a privileged white male who's had it easier than other people have, for sure, that haven't had those privileges. But I'll just say, I think whatever it is, you adapt to whatever your money is, and you can be happy. Like when I was a brand new school counselor making $25,000 in 1993, like I was fine. I wasn't unhappy. You just adapt and adjust to it. And I mean, if you want to do a side hustle and make more money, I mean, go ahead, I guess. But it's like I'm going to be so much happier doing something that I like at $25,000 than something I don't like at $75,000. It's like it's a no-brainer to me.
So the meter, like I'll just tell you, I've always had, I think it was something I learned from my dad, but comparing has always been something I've done in my life, which, I forgot who it was, but they say it's the ultimate thief of joy. You don't seem to have that thing inside you where you probably don't look at guys that went down another road. Like you're content. I wish I was more like that. I guess, is that accurate, or am I off on that?
I mean, like I said, this is my mission. Like
Yeah.
I'm so passionate about this. Like whenever people like see me, they're like, "Wow, you're passionate." And so, how could I look at somebody doing something else? And I can look at other people doing the things that they're passionate about, and I'm like, I totally get it. And so, yeah. And if you're not, it's hard. I mean, it's where do I go? What do I do? But I mean, look at what you're doing, Dirk. I mean, you're finding a way to do something that you feel passionate about through your podcast too, right? And helping other people and learning from your experiences. And so I think there's other ways that we can, even if we have some golden handcuffs, perhaps, there's other ways that we can still manifest our joy and happiness and passions while we're doing that. And maybe that turned into something else. Maybe you end up being the next big sensational viral podcast that's national, and that's your new thing. It's just off of your YouTube subscriptions, right? When we do that, I just think whether it manifests itself in money or whatever, we're still going to feel better about it. I mean, aren't you feeling that way about what you're doing with this podcast? Like it's giving you joy.
Yeah, I show up better, even in my real estate lending job where it's a lot of numbers, right? Because I get energy from, like, I really like talking to people like you, that it's attractive to see people in their flow. Like, and I'm in my flow a lot, like when I'm on the farm and with my kids and coaching, and I love music, and but it's addicting. It's like it's fun to be around people. So yeah, I feel like I'm a better dad,
Yeah.
better husband. I had a question before I let you go, Craig, and I don't know how to articulate this. It's such an interesting thing to me, and again, I don't ever get political on. I try not to get, but like my observation, like somebody once said, like, a good teacher, you shouldn't know what their viewpoint is, say, on a topic. We can throw any topic out there. It's their job to kind of get you to think about what you think. And so I've experienced with some of my kids, teachers that do the opposite. Like, what is your viewpoint? And we're seeing a lot of stuff going on. And I know that you're not always supposed to believe what you see or read, but just on like colleges and a lot of the, like a lot of the teachings and the beliefs that, what's your take on the role of a teacher? Like, are you supposed to let your students know how you feel about vaccinations in the Middle East? I mean, or are you supposed to not be that? I guess I don't know how else to ask it, but I think you know where I'm going.
Yeah, it's a really good question. And I think, look, I understand parents caring about that. I think there's a lot of parents going way overboard and trying to get too involved in dictating what does and doesn't happen in schools. You're not education experts, and yet they want to control, especially ironically, things that their politics or religious views don't allow. So now you can't do it, but then somebody else does. Like, the hypocrisy in that is aggravating, to say the least. I think it's okay I think we want critical thinkers. And I think to have critical thought, I think we have to show multiple sides to something and talk about them, and we can have different viewpoints on them. And I think even when we do that, having and modeling and practicing respectful discourse when we're having these conversations is really, really important. So to not bring up both sides of things is important. As a teacher, to share your personal views or not is, I think it's tricky. And I think it depends on the level you're at, elementary versus maybe high school. There's a little bit of a difference, but I think it's more okay in high school. Not in the sense, though, that it's my job to transform you into something that you don't believe. Like, I think that's probably crossing a line. But to say that I believe this, and I personally don't think there's anything wrong with that, as long as I'm also saying there's acceptance of others and for people that share their beliefs. And I think, especially I think when we're talking about what's right and wrong and human decency and exploring things, like, I think sometimes people take a side on something. And I mean, let's just go ahead and bring up the Arab-Israeli conflict. And it's way more complicated than is portrayed in the American media traditionally. Maybe it's in these last couple of weeks, it's a little different, but it's, and we've lived in that area. And so it's, so to be able to talk about it in a way where you can experience and understand both sides and have understanding, increased understanding and empathy for both sides, whether I bring my viewpoint into it or not, I think those are the most important things with critical thought and learning to have rational discourse that doesn't erupt into I'm right, you're wrong, I'm good, you're bad.
Fair enough. No, I'm just curious. One more question is just based on the future of education, the model that we're used to. There's different models. I know we talked a little bit about that. Do you see, like, in 20, 30 years, like, would you recognize the school system K through 12? Like, is it going to get totally shaken up, or do you see it being similar? Like, where do you see this going?
It's slow to change. It's too slow to change. We tend to teach the way we were taught. And, but I see growth. I mean, neuroscience, right? The science of learning is new. And so that's really just the last 10, 15, 20 years. And then for that actually manifests itself into the classrooms, into what's there. I think we're going to see change. I think it'll be slower than we wanted to do. I think you always see pockets of people doing really progressive things. And I mean, look, is there anything wrong with the classics English style education, that British style? Not necessarily, but I think that's not the only way. And I think, like, inquiry based and students understanding and being critical thinkers and all that. And then as opposed to just sitting and listening to lectures, do I want to see that stuff grow? And because we want kids that are going to be successful adults. The way that we used to teach school, I'm not sure that teaches them to be problem solvers and critical thinkers that are going to go change the world and make it better for the next generation. And that's where I think it has to go more. But man, just like legislation, even on teacher observations, like, for me to get one state to change is hard. So then it's slow. It's never as fast as you want.
So how would you mentioned it, what's your definition of successful adults?
Well, positive contributors to society, which can manifest itself in a million different ways. People that are critical thinkers, people that are problem solvers, people that are compassionate and empathetic and understanding. I think that's a pretty good baseline for human beings.
Yeah. No, I hope I didn't trap you there. I was just curious.
No.
Because I think that's a really interesting topic, is what is success? I guess it's all of the above, but anything, Craig, that I missed that you felt like it's kind of on the tip of your tongue that I didn't ask you that you should? Again, you understand the deal with this podcast and who I'm trying to reach and ultimately what I'm trying to do. Anything that you want to end with, or do you feel pretty complete?
No, I mean, maybe just reiterate that, man, life is short. And if you feel something that you're passionate about or you're genius about or that's your thing, don't not do it. Maybe not as your main thing, maybe do as a side thing, whatever, but don't not do it because of money or because of getting trapped. It's too short. You won't regret it.
Yeah, I really like you said that. Real quick, I'm part of this group of professionals, and they're in my line of work, but we have coaches, and it's more about trying to be better in our jobs. It's about being better people. And we have really great speakers. Like we've had Joe Dispenza come, and it's a small group, like 35. We've had a guy named Jesse Itzler. I don't know if you know who Jesse is, but Jesse talks a lot about that. And he talks about like, how many more times are you going to spend with your parents? Like you might have 15 more times, like if they live in another state. And he talks about how, you think that your parents are going to be around for 15 years, but maybe that's 8 times you spend with them, or 9 or whatever. And so I think about that a lot, that life is short. And I know that sometimes I get sidetracked by things that don't matter. And then, throwing the football with my son, or hanging out with my dog, or, talking to my wife. It's like, I remember that the little things like are important. And, anyways, I'm kind of rambling, but I like what you said about that. Thank you so much for coming on. I know you're busy, and I got you at a good time. Where's your next trip, by the way?
I am new Santa Fe.
Oh, wow. Never been.
Not a bad place.
My mom went there for her honeymoon, second marriage. And yeah, she's really into that town, that city, but have fun. And thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks, Dirk. It was great to see you, man.
You too, man. Take care.
Take care.